Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What is True. And I'm coming to you here on Tuesday evening, the last day of February. That is the 28th day of 2023. And we're going to be continue reading this particular book that I have here, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Chapter 5, which is critical. The title of the book, that chapter is American Red Cross Mission in Russia in 1917. So this happened, it happened, goodness, 105 years ago. And it's remarkable what I've learned here and how many players were involved in how they set up this revolution to take place in Russia to eliminate the Tsar and to take power and eventually kill many people in that country. A horrible, horrible thing has happened. 99% of the people out there have no idea what happened to the Russian people and how many people got killed there. The Second World War was a dastardly war. It's sad that everybody talks about what took place in Germany and actually claim that Hitler is a terrible person. But they never talk about Mr. Lenin, who was far worse, and then Stalin, who took over after him and ran off Trotsky. So let's get into the book. As I read here, hope everyone is doing well tonight. So chapter 5 is called The American Red Cross Mission in Russia, 1917. Poor Mr. Billings believed he was in charge of the scientific mission for the relief of Russia. He was in reality nothing but a mask. The Red Cross complexion of the mission was nothing but a mask. It was a cover-up. It was a cover, so to speak. Let me change something real quick here. Make it a little bit easier for me to read. Cornelius Keller, Kelleher, assisted to William Boyce Thompson in George F. Kennan's Russia Leaves the War. The Wall Street Project in Russia in 1917 used the Red Cross mission as its operational vehicle. Both Guarantee Trust and National City Bank had representatives in Russia at the time of the revolution. Frederick M. Corse, C-O-R-S-E, of the National City Bank branch in Petrograd, was attached to the American Red Cross mission, of which a great deal will be said later. Guarantee Trust was represented by Henry Crosby Emery. Emery was temporarily held by the Germans in 1918 and then moved on to represent Guarantee Trust in China. Up to about 1915, the most influential persons in American Red Cross National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. was Miss Mabel, M-A-B-E-L, Boardman, an active and energetic promoter. Miss Boardman had been the moving force behind the Red Cross enterprise, although its endowment came from wealthy and prominent persons, including J.P. Morgan, Mrs. E.H. Harriman, which Miss Harriman is, her husband was the railroad tycoon at one time, Cleveland H. Dodge, and Mrs. Russell Sage. The 1910 fundraising campaign for $2 million, for example, was successful only because it was supported by these wealthy residents of New York City. In fact, most of the money came from New York City. J.P. Morgan himself contributed $100,000, and 7 other contributors in New York City amassed $300,000. So that's $400,000 out of the $2 million there already. Only one person outside of New York City contributed over $10,000, and that was William J. Boardman, Miss Boardman's father. Henry P. Davison was chairman of the 1910 New York Fundraising Committee and later became chairman of the War Council of the American Red Cross, that is. In other words, in World War I, the Red Cross depended heavily on Wall Street, and especially on the Morgan firm. The Red Cross was unable to cope with the demands of World War I and, in effect, was taken over by these New York bankers, you see. According to John Foster Dulles, that is, these businessmen viewed the American Red Cross as a virtual arm of government. They envisioned making an incalculable contribution to the winning of the war. In so doing, they made a mockery of the Red Cross motto, that is, neutrality and humanity. In exchange for raising funds, Wall Street asked for the Red Cross War Council, and on the recommendation of Cleveland H. Dodge, one of Woodrow Wilson's financial backers, Henry P. Davison, a partner in J.P. Morgan Company, became chairman. The list of administrators of the Red Cross then began to take on the appearance of the New York Directory of Directors, that is, John D. Ryan, president of Anacon Copper Company, George W. Hill, president of the American Tobacco Company, Grayson M.P. Murphy, vice president of Guarantee Trust Company, and Ivy Lee L.E.E., public relations expert for the Rockefellers, Henry Hopkins, later to achieve fame under President Roosevelt, became assistant to the general manager of the Red Cross in Washington, D.C. So in reality, these are heavy hitters here, folks. These are well-to-do people, which is kind of wondering what is going on here. The question of the Red Cross mission to Russia came before the third meeting of the reconstructed War Council, which was held in the Red Cross building in Washington, D.C. on Friday, May 29, 1917 at 11 a.m. Chairman Davison was deputed to explore the idea with Alexander Leggett of the International Harvester Company. Subsequently, International Harvester, which had considerable interest in Russia, provided $200,000 to assist financing the Russian mission. At a later meeting, it was made known that William Boyce Thompson, director of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, had offered to pay the entire expense of the commission. The offer was accepted in a telegram. Your desire to pay expenses of commission to Russia is very much appreciated. From our point of view, very important. Next paragraph here. The members of the mission received no pay. All expenses were paid by William Boyce Thompson, and the $200,000 from International Harvester was apparently used in Russia for political subsidies. We know from the files of the U.S. Embassy in Petrograd that the U.S. Red Cross gave 4,000 rubles to Prince Lavoy, president of the Council of Ministers for Relief of Revolutionaries, as 10,000 rubles in two payments in Kerensky for relief of political refugees. American Red Cross mission to Russia in 1917, that is in August, the American Red Cross mission to Russia had only a nominal relationship with the American Red Cross, and much truly had been the most unusual Red Cross mission in history. All expenses, including those of the uniforms, the members were all colonels, majors, captains, or lieutenants, were paid out of the pocket of William Boyce Thompson. One contemporary observer dubbed the all-officer group as a Haytian Army, Haytian. The American Red Cross delegation of about 40 colonels, majors, captains, and lieutenants arrived yesterday. It is headed by Colonel Dr. Billings of Chicago and includes Colonel William B. Thompson and many doctors and civilians, all with military titles. We dubbed the outfit the Haytian Army because there was no privates. They had come to fill no clearly defined mission, as far as I can find out. In fact, Governor Francis told me some time ago that he urged they not to be allowed to come, as there were already too many missions from the various allies in Russia. Apparently, the commission imagined there was urgent call for doctors and nurses in Russia. As a matter of fact, there is at present a surplus of medical talent and nurses, native and foreign, in the country, and many half-empty hospitals in the large cities. The mission actually comprised only 24, not 40, having military rank from lieutenant colonel down to lieutenant, and was supplemented by 3 orderlies, 2 motion picture photographers, and two interpreters without rank. Only 5 out of the 24 were doctors. In addition, there were 2 medical researchers. The mission arrived by train in Petrograd via Siberia in August of 1917. The 5 doctors and orderlies stayed 1 month, returning to the United States on September 11th. So this is before the revolution took place. Dr. Frank Billings, nominal head of the mission and professor of medicine at the University of Chicago, was reported to be disgusted with the overly political activities of the majority of the mission. The other medical men were William S. Thacker, professor of medicine at St. Johns Hopkins University, G.J. McCarthy, fellow of the Phillips Institute for Study and Prevention of Tuberculosis at Philadelphia, Harry C. Sherman, professor of food chemistry at Columbia University, C.E.A. Winslow, professor of bacteriology and hygiene at Yale Medical School, and Wilbur E. Post, professor of medicine at Rush Medical College. Dr. Malcolm Grow of the Medical Officers Reserve Corps of the U.S. Army, and Orrin Reitman, professor of clinical medicine from New York Polyclinic Hospital. George C. Whippet was listed as professor of sanitary engineering at Harvard University, but in fact was partner of the New York firm of Hazen, Whippet, and Fuller engineering consultants. This is significant because Malcolm Pimpett, who more later was listed as an assistant sanitary engineer and employed as an engineer by Hazen, Whippet, and Fuller. The majority of the mission, as seen from the table, was made up of lawyers, financiers, and their assistants. From the New York Financial District, the mission was financed by William B. Thompson. Before we talked about him, described in the official Red Cross circular at Commissioner and Business Manager, Director of the United States Federal Bank of New York. Thompson brought along Cornelius Kepler, described as a attache to the mission, but actually acutely secretary to Thompson, and with the same address of 14 Wall Street, New York City. Wow. Can't get much closer than that, can you? The publicity for the mission was handled by Henry S. Brown of the same address. Thomas Day Thatcher was the attorney with Simpson, Thatcher, and Bartlett, a firm founded by his father, that is Thomas Thatcher, in 1884, and prominently involved in railroad reorganizations and mergers. Thomas S. Jr. first worked for the family firm, became assistant U.S. attorney under Henry L. Stimson, and returned to the family firm in 1909. The young Thatcher was a close friend of Felix Frankfurter, who will be a Supreme Court justice later on, and later became assistant to Raymond Robbins, also on the Red Cross mission. In 1925, he was appointed district judge under President Coolidge, became a solicitor general under Herbert Hoover, and was a director of William Boyce Thompson's Institute. So they show a listing of who these people are, which we've already just shared those. So we'll just continue on. Allen Wardwell, also a deputy commissioner and secretary to the chairman, was a lawyer with the law firm of Stetson, Jennings, and Russell of 15 Broad Street, New York City, and H.B. Redfield was law secretary to Wardwell. Major Wardwell was the son of William Thompson Wardwell, a longtime treasurer of the Standard Oil of New Jersey and Standard Oil of New York. The elder of Wardwell was one of the signees or signers of the famous Standard Oil Trust Agreement, a member of the Committee to Organize Red Cross Activities in the Spanish-American War, and the director of the Greenwich Savings Bank. His son, Allen, was a director not only of Greenwich Savings, but also of Bank of New York and Trust Company, and the Georgian Manganese Company, along with W. Avery Harriman, that is, a director of Guarantee Trust. In 1917, Allen Wardwell was affiliated with Stetson, Jennings, and Russell, and later joined Davis, Polk, Wardwell, Gardner, and Reed. That is, Frank L. Polk was acting Secretary of State during the Bolshevik Revolution period. The Senate Obermann Committee noted that Wardwell was favorable to the Soviet regime, although Poole, the State Department official on the spot, noted that Major Wardwell has, of all Americans, the wildest personal knowledge of the terror. In the 1920s, Orwell became active with the Russian-American Chamber of Commerce in promoting Soviet trade objectives. The treasurer of the mission was James W. Andrews, auditor of Liggett and Myers Tobacco Company of St. Louis. Robert I. Barr, B-A-R-R, another member, was listed as a deputy commissioner. He was a vice president of Chase Securities Companies at 120 Broadway and of the Chase National Bank. Listed as being in charge of advertising was William Cochin of 61 Broadway, New York City. Raymond Robbins, a mining promoter, was included as a deputy commissioner and described as a social economist. Finally, the mission included two members of the Swift and Company of Union Stockyards in Chicago, Illinois. The Swifts had been previously mentioned as being connected with German espionage in the United States during World War I, and Harold H. Swift, and deputy commissioner, was assistant to the vice president of Swift and Company. William G. Nicholson was also with Swift and Company in Union Stockyards in Chicago. Two persons were unofficially added to the mission after it arrived in Petrograd. That was Frederick M. Corse, C-O-R-S-E, representative of the National City Bank in Petrograd, and Herbert A. Magnums, who was a very highly recommended by John W. Finch, the confidential agent in China of Colonel William B. Thompson. The Pernigal Papers, deposit at the Hoover Institute, contained primary material on the mission. Malcolm Perney was an engineer employed by the firm of Hazen, Whippet, and Fuller, consultant engineers on 42nd Street, New York City. Perney was a member of the mission, listed on the manifest as assistant sanitary engineer. George C. Whippet, a partner in the firm, was also included in the group. The Pinnacle Papers included an original telegram from William B. Thompson inviting assistant sanitary engineer Perney to meet with him and Henry B. Davison, chairman of the Red Cross War Council and partner in the J.P. Morgan firm. Before leaving for Russia, the telegram reads as follows. Western Union Telegram, New York, that is June 21st, 1917, to Malcolm Perney. I should be very much like to have you dine with me at the Metropolitan Club, 16th Street and 5th Avenue, New York City, at 8 o'clock tomorrow, Friday evening, to meet Mr. H.P. Davison. And as to W.B. Thompson at 14 Wall Street. The files do not elucidate why Morgan's partner, Davison and Thompson, director of the Federal Reserve Bank, two of the most prominent financial men in New York, wished to have dinner with assistant sanitary engineer about to leave for Russia. Neither do the files explain why Davison was subsequently unable to meet Dr. Billings and the commission itself, nor why it was necessary to advise Perney of his inability to do so. But we may surmise that the official cover of the mission, that is the Red Cross activities, was a significant less interest in Thompson's Perney activities, whatever they may have been. We do know that Davison wrote to Dr. Billings on June 25th, 1917. This is a letter. Dear Dr. Billings, it is disappointing to me and to my associates on the War Council not have been able to meet and body the members of your commission. A copy of this letter was also mailed to the assistant sanitary engineer Perney with a personal letter from Morgan's banker, Henry P. Davison, which read, My dear Mr. Perkin, you will, and I am sure, entirely understand the reason for the letter to Dr. Billings, copy of which is enclosed and accepted as in the spirit of which it is sent. The purpose of Davison's letter to Dr. Billings was to apologize to the Commission and Billings for being unable to meet with them. We may then be justified in supposing that some deeper arrangement were made by Davison and Perney concerning the activities of the mission in Russia, and that these arrangements were known to Thompson. The probable nature of these activities will be described later. The American Red Cross mission, or perhaps we should call it the Wall Street mission to Russia, also employed 3 Russian English interpreters, Captain Avgusky, a Russian Bolshevik Boris Renstein, a Russian American and later secretary to Lenin, and the head of Karl Rekdak Bureau of International Revolutionary Propaganda, which also employed John Reed and Albert Rise Williams, and Alexander Gunberg, alias Berg, that is, real name Michael Gusenberg, who was a brother of Zorin, Z-O-R-I-N, a Bolshevik minister. Gunberg was also the chief Bolshevik agent in Scandinavia. He later became a confidential assistant to Floyd Odium of Atlas Corporation in the United States, as well as an advisor to Reed Shelkel, a vice president of the Chase Bank. It should be asked in passing how useful were the translators or relations supplied by these interpreters. On September 13, 1918, H.A. Doolittle, America's vice consul at Stockholm, reported to the Secretary of State on a conversation with Captain Abusky, who was a close personal friend of Colonel Robbins of the Red Cross mission, concerning a meeting of the Merment Soviet and the Allies. The question of inviting the Allies to land at Merment was under discussion at the Soviet, with Major Thatcher of the Red Cross mission acting for the Allies. Abusky interpreted Thatcher's views for the Soviet. Abusky spoke at some length in Russian, supposedly translated for Thatcher, but in reality for Trotsky. Remember, Trotsky is not so, he's not a Russian, he's a German. See. To the effect that the United States would never permit such a landing to occur, and urging the speedy recognition of the Soviets and their politics. Apparently, Thatcher suspected it was being mistranslated and expressed his indignation. However, Abusky immediately telegraphed the substance to Bolshevik headquarters and through their press bureau, and it appeared in all the papers as emanating from the remarks of Major Thatcher and as the general opinion of all truly accredited American representatives. Abusky recounted to Madeleine Summons, U.S. Consul General in Moscow, several instances where he had said and Raymond Robbins of the Red Cross mission had manipulated the Bolshevik press, especially in regard to the recall of the ambassador, Mr. Francis. He admitted that they had not been scrupulous, but had acted according to their idea of right, regardless of how they might have conflicted with the politics of the accredited American representatives. This then was the American Red Cross mission to Russia in 1917. Also, the American Red Cross mission to Romania. In 1917, the American Red Cross also sent a medical assistant mission to Romania, then fighting the Central Powers as an ally of Russia. Okay, so this is now the war is going on. This is the First World War, and Romania is involved. Okay, a comparison of the American Red Cross mission to Russia with that sent to Romania suggests that the Red Cross mission based in Petrograd had very little official connection with the Red Cross and even less connection with medical assistance, whereas the Red Cross mission to Romania valiantly upheld the Red Cross twin principles of humanity and neutrality. The Red Cross mission to Petrograd flagrantly abused both. So what you're talking about simply was that their perspective in the Red Cross's mission is that basically it deals with humanity and it deals with neutrality. So there's no favoritism here at all in Romania. But that's quite the opposite that took place in Russia. And that's what they're supposed to be doing. But see, when you give $2 million, you can do whatever you want to do, you see, which was a lot of money back then. The American Red Cross mission to Romania left the United States in July 1917 and located itself at Jassy, Jassy. The mission consisted of 30 persons under Chairman Henry W. Anderson, a lawyer from Virginia. Of the 30, 16 were either doctors or surgeons. So this is over half of the people there actually are doctors. Okay. By comparison, out of 29 individuals with the Red Cross mission in Russia, only 3 were doctors, although another 4 members were from universities that specialize in medical related fields. At the most, 7 could be classified as doctors with the mission to Russia, compared with 16 with the mission to Romania. There was about the same number of orderlies and nurses with both missions. The significant comparison, however, is that the Romanian mission had only 2 lawyers, 1 treasurer, and 1 engineer. The Russian mission had 15 lawyers and businessmen. None of the Romanian mission lawyers or doctors came from anywhere near the New York area, but all except 1, an observer from the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. Of the lawyer and businessmen with the Russian mission came from that area. which is to say that more than half the total of the Russian mission came from the New York financial district. In other words, the relative composition of those missions confirms that the mission in Romania had a legitimate purpose to practice medicine, while the Russian mission had a non-medical and strictly political objective. From its personnel, it could be classified as a commercial or financial mission, but from its actions, it was a subversive political action group. The Red Cross mission to Romania remained at its post in Jassy for the remainder of 1917 and to 1918. The medical staff of the American Red Cross mission in Russia, the 7 doctors, quit in disgust in August of 1917, protesting the political activities of Colonel Thompson and returned to the United States. Consequently, in September 1917, when the Romanian mission appealed to Petrograd for American doctors and nurses to help out in the near crisis condition in Jassy, there were no American doctors or nurses in Russia available to go to Romania. Wow, amazing. Whereas the bulk of the mission in Russia occupied its time in internal political maneuvering, the mission in Romania threw itself into relief work as soon as it arrived. On September 17, 1917, a confidential cable from Henry W. Anderson, chairman of the Romanian mission to the American ambassador Francis in Petrograd, requested immediately and urgent help in the form of $5 million to meet an impending catastrophe in Romania. Then followed a series of letters, cables, and communication from Anderson to Francis appealing unsuccessfully for help. So you see, real, they needed help, they need doctors, you see money, everything they needed. On September 28, 1917, while Pico, the American ministry in Romania, cabled Francis at length for relay to Washington and repeated Anderson's analysis of the Romanian crisis and the danger of epidemics and worse as winter closed in. Considerable money and heroic measures required considerable money and heroic measures required to prevent far-reaching disaster. Useless handle situation without someone with authority and access to government, with proper organization to look after transport, receive, and distribute supplies. The hands of Bolshevik and Henderson were tied at all Romanian supplies, and financial transaction was handled by the Red Cross mission in Petrograd. And Thompson and his staff of 15 Wall Street lawyers and businessmen apparently had matters of greater concern than Romania's Red Cross affairs. There's no indication in the Petrograd's embassy files at the U.S. State Department that Thompson, Robbins, or Thatcher concerned themselves at any time in 1917 or 1918 with the urgent situation in Romania. Communications from Romania went to Ambassador Francis or to one of his embassy staff, and occasionally through the consul in Moscow. By October 1917, the Romanian situation reached a crisis point. While the Political cabled Davison in New York, that is via Petrograd, on October 5th, most urgent problem here, disaster effects feared. Could you possibly arrange special shipment? Must rush or too late? Then on November 5th, Anderson cabled the Petrograd embassy saying that delays in sending help had already cost several thousand lives. On November 13th, Anderson and cabled Ambassador Francis concerning Thompson's lack of interest in Romanian conditions, requesting Thomas furnish details of all shipments I received but have not obtained same. Also requested him keep me posted as to transport conditions but received very little information. Anderson then requested that Ambassador Francis intercede on his behalf in order to have funds for the Romanian Red Cross handled in a separate account in London, directly under Anderson and removed from the control of Thompson's mission. That could be, that would be a pretty upsetting issue. That there was a guy, people in Romania trying to save people's lives, and these clowns up in Russia are just waiting for the results to destroy that country, because that was in October. Thompson and Kerensky's Russia. What then was the Red Cross mission doing? Thompson certainly acquired a reputation for opulent living in Petrograd, but apparently he undertook only two major projects in Kerensky's Russia. support for American propaganda program, and support for the Russian Liberty Loan. Soon after arriving in Russia, Thompson met with Madame Breshko Briskovskill and David Soskish, Kerensky's secretary, and agreed to contribute $2 million to a committee of popular education so that it could have its own press and engage the staff of lectures with cinematology and illustrations. This was for the propaganda purpose of urging Russia to continue to end the war against Germany. Okay, according to Soskish, a packet of 50,000 rubles was given to Breskovkovich with this statement: "This is for you to spend according to your best judgment." A further 2,100,000 rubles, is 2.1 million rubles, were deposited into our current bank account. A letter from J.P. Morgan to the State Department confirms that Morgan's cable of 425,000 rubles to Thompson as his request for the Russian Liberty Loan. J.P. also conveyed the interest of the Morgan firm regarding the wisdom of making an individual subscription through Mr. Thompson to the Russian Liberty Loan. These sums were transmitted through the National City Bank branch in Petrograd. Thompson gives the Bolsheviks $1 million. Of greater historical significance, however, was the assistance given to the Bolsheviks first by Thompson, then after December 4, 1917, by Raymond Robbins. So already the revolution is taking place. That is in November, so this is actually another 2 weeks afterwards. I think maybe a little over 3 weeks. Thompson contributed to the Bolshevik cause was recorded in the contemporary American press, that is the Washington Press, of February 2nd, 1918, carried the following paragraphs. Gives Bolsheviks $1 million. That's what it said in the press. W.B. Thompson, Red Cross donor, believes party misrepresented New York, February 2nd, 1918. William B. Thompson, who was in Petrograd from July until November last, has made a personal contribution of $1 million to the Bolshevik for the purpose of spreading their doctrine in Germany and in Austria. So it's all for propaganda here. It has nothing to do with the Red Cross, period. Mr. Thompson had an opportunity to study Russian conditions as head of the American Red Cross mission, expenses of which also were largely defrayed by his personal contributions. He believes that the Bolsheviks constitute the greatest power against pro-Germanias in Russia, and that their propaganda has been undermining the militarist regime of the general in power. Mr. Thompson depreciates American criticism of the Bolsheviks. He believes they have been misrepresented and has made the financial contribution to the cause in the belief that it will be money well spent for the future of Russia as well as for the Allied cause. Herman Hagedorn biography that is called The Magnet, William Boyce Thompson and His Time, 1869 to 1930, reproduces a photograph of a cablegram from J.P. Morgan in New York to W.B. Thompson. Care, American Red Cross, Hotel Europe, Petrograd. The cable is date stamped, showing it was received at Petrograd on the 8th day of December of 1917, and reads, "Your cable second received. We have paid National City Bank $1 million as instructed. Morgan." The National City Bank branch in Petrograd has been exempted from the Bolshevik nationalization decree, the only foreigner or domestic Russian bank to have been so exempted. Correct, because they were the ones that were doing it. Okay, the rest of the other banks were domestic banks, and they were probably having a hard time, really. Hayden said that the $1 million paid in Thompson's NCB, National City Bank account, was used for political purposes. Had nothing to do with the people, folks. To overthrow the country. Socialist mining promoter Raymond Robbins. William B. Thompson left Russia in early December 1917 to return home. He traveled via London, where, in company with Thompson Lamont of the J.P. Morgan firm, he visited Prime Minister Lloyd George. An episode was we picked up in the next chapter. His deputy, Raymond Robbins, was left in charge of the Red Cross mission to Russia. The general impression that Colonel Robbins presented in the subsequent months was not overlooked by the press. In the words of the Russian newspaper Rusko Slavo. Robbins, on the one hand, represented American labor, and on the other hand, American capital, which is endeavoring through the Soviets to gain their Russian markets. Raymond Robbins started life as a manager of a Florida phosphate company, commissaire. From the base, he developed a kaolin deposit, then prospected Texas and the Indian territories in the late 19th century. Kaolin is clay. It's a special type of clay. It's a white clay. Moving north to Alaska, Robbins made a fortune in the Klondike gold rush. Then, for no observable reasons, he switched to socialism and the reform movement. By 1912, he was an active member of Roosevelt's Progressive Party. He joined the 1917 American Red Cross mission to Russia as a social economist. I wonder if he is a Fabian socialist, maybe. There is considerable evidence, including Robbins' own statements, that his reformist social good appeals were little more than covers for the acquisition of further power and wealth, reminiscent of Frederick Howell's suggestion in Confessions of a Monopolist. For example, in February of 1918, Arthur Bullard was in Petrograd with the U.S. Committee on Public Information, engaged in writing a long memorandum for Colonel Edward House. That guy is always around. This memorandum was given to Robbins by Bullard for comments and criticism before transmission to House in Washington, D.C. Robbins' very unsocialistic and imperialistic comments were to the effect that the manuscript was uncommonly discriminating, far-seeing, and well done, but that he had done one or two reservations, in particular that recognition of the Bolsheviks was long overdue, that he should have been effectively immediately, and that had the U.S. so recognized the Bolsheviks. I believe that we would now be in control of the surplus resources of Russia and have control officers at all points on the frontier. So this is getting a little hasty here. Desire to gain control of the surplus resources of Russia. This is what they're looking for. They're actually going for certain minerals. Anything was also obvious to the Russians. Does this sound like a social reformer of the American Red Cross or a Wall Street mining promoter engaged in the practical exercise of imperialism? In any event, Robbins made no bones about the support for the Bolsheviks. Barely 3 weeks after the Bolshevik phase of the revolution started, Robbins cabled Henry Davison at Red Cross headquarters, please urge upon the President the necessity of our continual intercourse with the Bolshevik government. Interestingly, the cable was in reply to a cable instructing Robbins that the President desires the withholding of direct communications by representatives of the United States with the Bolshevik government. Several State Department reports complain about the partisan nature of the Robbins activities. For example, on March 27, 1919, this is fully after a year after the revolution, Harris, the American consulate at Vladivostok, commented on a long conversation he had with Robbins and protested gross inaccuracies in the letter reporting. Harris wrote, Robbins stated to me that no German or Austrian prisoners of war had joined the Bolshevik army up to May of 1918. Robbins knew the statement was absolutely false. Harris then proceeded to provide the details of evidence available to Robbins. Harris concluded Robbins deliberately misstated facts concerning Russia at that time, and he has been doing it ever since. On returning to the United States in 1918, Robbins continues his efforts in behalf of the Bolsheviks. When the files of the Soviet Bureau were seized by the Lusk committee, it was found that Robbins had had considerable correspondence with Ludwig Martens, Martens, and other members of the Bureau. One of the most interesting documents seized was a letter from Santarel Neurtervel, alias Alexander Neupberg, the first Soviet representative in the United States, to Conrad Calhoun, editor of the New York Daily Forward. The letter called on the party faithful to prepare the way for Raymond Robbins. July 6, 1918. Dear Conrad Calhoun, it is of the utmost importance that the socialist press set up a clamor immediately that Colonel Raymond Robbins, who has just returned from Russia at the head of the Red Cross mission, should be heard from in a public report to the American people. The armed intervention danger has greatly increased. The reaction are using the Czech-Slovak adventure to bring about invasion. Robbins said all the facts about this and about the situation in Russia generally. He takes our point of view. I'm enclosing a copy of a call editorial which shows a general line of argument, also some facts about Czechoslovaks, fraternity, PS, and AU. The International Red Cross and Revolution. Unknown to the administrators, the Red Cross has been used from time to time as a vehicle or cover for revolutionary activities. The use of the Red Cross markings for unauthorized purposes is not uncommon. When Tsar Nicholas was moved from Petrograd to Toplitz, allegedly for his safety, although this direction was towards danger rather than safety, the train carried Japanese Red Cross place cards. The State Department files contain examples of revolutionary activity on the cover of Red Cross activities. For example, the Russian Red Cross official Chekhov was arrested in Holland in 1919 for revolutionary acts. During the Hungarian Bolshevik Revolution in 1918, led by Bela Kun, K-U-N, major leader there, a woman, as well as I recollect, Russian members of the Red Cross also, you see. So this is all they're doing, is doing a cover here. Or revolutionary operations as members of the Russian Red Cross were found in Vienna and in Budapest. So they were actually found in Budapest, Vienna, Austria, and in Budapest, Hungary. Is that right? Correct. In 1919, the U.S. ambassador in London cabled Washington's startling news to the British government. He had learned that the several Americans who had arrived in this country in the uniform of the Red Cross, who stated that they were Bolsheviks, were proceeding through France to Switzerland to spread Bolshevik propaganda. The ambassador noted that about 400 American Red Cross people had arrived in London in November and December 1918. Of that number, one quarter returned to the United States. The remainder insisted on proceeding to France. There was a later report on January 15, 1918, to the effect that an editor of a labor newspaper in London had been approached on 3 different occasions by the 3 different American Red Cross officials who offered to take commissions to Bolsheviks in Germany. Something's really fishy here, isn't it? The editor has suggested to the U.S. ambassador that it watched American Red Cross personnel. The U.S. State Department took these reports seriously and poked cable for names, stating, if true, I consider it of the greatest importance. So basically what's going on here is, why are these people impersonating American Red Cross officials? See, this is a problem here, you see. Is the American Red Cross going along with this? What's going on here? You know, why are they dressed up in these uniforms that are basically represent American Red Cross? They're basically acting as spies. To summarize, the picture we found or we formed of the 1917 American Red Cross mission to Russia is remote from one of mutual humanitarianism. The mission was in fact a mission of Wall Street financiers to influence and pave the way for control through either Kerensky or the Bolshevik revolutionaries of the Russian market and resources. No other explanation will explain the actions of the mission. However, neither Thompson nor Robbins was a Bolshevik, nor was either even a consistent socialist. The writer is inclined to the interpretation that the socialist appeal of each man were covers for more prosthetic objectives. Each man was intent upon the commercial, that is, each sought to use the political process in Russia for personal, financial ends. Whether the Russian people wanted the Bolsheviks was of no concern. Whether the Bolshevik regime would act against the United States, as it consistently did later, was of no concern. It's all about the money. It's all about taking, stealing. The single overwhelming objective was to gain political and economic influence with the new regime, whatever its ideology. So what's going on here is simply this could have been done under the Tsar. So what they put up is some cronies, which are communists, Lenin and Trotsky and others, Kerensky. And these guys are hugely terrible men, okay? They don't give a rat's ass about the Russians at all. None of them do. Kerensky allowed them to come out of the jails. That is, these people who were mentally retarded or they were locked up for their own protection. And then they went upon and they simply seized people. They went, seriously, folks, this is the truth. They went into Moscow and basically robbed some of the most well-to-do people there of their belongings, what they would call bourgeoisie. The single overwhelming objective was to gain political and economic influence with the new regime, whatever its ideology. They didn't care. If William Boyce Thompson had acted alone, then his directorship of the Federal Reserve Bank would be inconsequential. However, the fact that his mission was dominated by representatives of Wall Street institutions raises a serious question. In effect, whether the mission was a planned, premeditated operation by the Wall Street syndicate. This, the reader will have to judge for himself as the rest of the story unfolds. So this is the chapter 5. Some notes here. Again, he got some of these notes again from the John Foster Dulles talking about the Red Cross. I think this is a book that was written in New York, and I think it's Harper Books in 1950. So this is, again, you see what's going on here. It's not about anything helping the people. It never is, folks. Never will be. Let me just explain something to you really clear and just get it in your head. When we go to the countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, all that, it ain't about freeing anybody, okay? It never has been, folks. It's about taking control and finding someone they can use in government. What makes me wonder, why the hell were we there in Afghanistan for, well, almost 20 years? What the fuck are we doing there? You see, and obviously, we left the hardware there too. We left all our weapons there. Like, for example, what the hell are you doing? I mean, anybody in the military would say, why didn't you bring those weapons back? All you did was leave those things there for someone to take and use on innocent people or war against other people. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. But it's, this is all done right out in the front of people, and people have no idea what's going on. They're completely caught up in other things and what's on television or a football game and not understanding what the hell is going on. So it just, and then the bombing of Iraq, a lot of the things most people are unaware of, they went there to basically do some other things. And then, you see, we paid for the war. And then another company, the Kellogg Group, whatever the company is, I'm trying to think of something else. I can't think of it right quick here. But it's the American people paid for the stinking war in Iraq, and they also paid for the cleanup. And they both, the companies afterwards, same thing in not only Iraq, twice with Kuwait. They all benefited. Kellogg, Root, and Brown was another company. Bechtel was another one. And these people were carrying on, as I recall, 2 jobs. They were working for the government, and yet they were also financially involved themselves. They benefited from all this. That's what they did. Anyway, that's what has taken place, and I'm going to conclude now. Good to see you, Nico. You're probably in bed by now, or either up in the morning. You're probably 6 hours, so it's pretty early in the morning for you. It's good to see you. It's good to have everyone here. Chapter 5 is interesting. So they used the American Red Cross. I wonder also, this is a question, a speculation question, is that Doctors Without Borders, is that correct? Are they used for the same ploy? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just asking a question. But they definitely used the American Red Cross time and time again. And they were interested in basically they're getting a foot in there. And that's why they had all this money, because this was money invested. And then eventually they would reap what they wanted. You see, they were going to take whatever they found in Russia. It didn't matter, minerals, copper, or whatever you want to name, they're looking for that. And they're going to buy out companies. They're going to take them over, you see. And when the communists do this, they're taking over them to basically destroy them, and then they come in. What I mean by destroying, don't get me wrong, it's the point of basically they destroy all industry. So the bourgeoisie are no longer in charge. So now they just hand it all over to the American people, the businesses, and they take it. That's what took place, you see. So it's robbery, outright robbery. And again, I said earlier in one of my talks today, or last night, today, earlier, that this was payback for what took place during the Civil War. And this particular book deals with that. It's The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson. And it deals with what I call perspective that the Civil War, and he talks about it. I've read the chapter in here. He talks about it, and it's a fact, is that the British were in Canada and the French were in Mexico. And what they wanted to do was to separate the United States. That was the plan. And the plan was simply the South would become France and the North would become British. They were going to get a piece of the pie. Both of those countries were. And with Lincoln's recommendation asking for help, which is the only one he could actually ask for of any power at that point, was Russia. And they sent their Navy. And there actually are photographs of them not only in Baltimore, I think Philadelphia, and also San Francisco. So that was a clear sign to the British and French, you're not going to have an easy time here. There's going to be a problem, you see. In other words, if you send more troops here or whatever in this country or try to, you're not going to have to go through Russia. So that pissed them off. That upset them heavily. And so what happened was simply is, and they lost. It was the hope of actually destroying this country. So they lost that opportunity. So they said, we're going to pay back this guy. We're going to pay back this family, Russians, and they're going to feel the pain. They never say that, but that's the motive here, is to do that, plus also take everything they got, steal it all. See. Okay, so thank you for being here. Chapter 5, and again, it's this particular book by Anthony C. Sutton, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. He wrote another book with about Hitler, and the money was also furnished for him. And what I understand, and I'm just going to say it real quick here, it's very, to me, it's just very obvious. They provided the two sides here. They created a war for Russia in the Second World War and Germany again. It was to do the same thing, to destroy life in those countries and destroy white people, especially white people, men, and destroy both countries in a way that they couldn't recover. But both have actually recovered too. But it shows how they always are 2 or 3 steps ahead of everybody else because they have plans in the future. And what they're doing here eventually will lead to their plans in World War II. And they would have never been able, again, like I said in my video yesterday, this morning, was still, if they hadn't had what we call the Federal Reserve Bank here, which were private bankers who used the treasurer of the United States to take the money from the people here and use it for their wars. That's what they did. That's what they really did, folks. Because Britain, France, Germany were all tapped out. And they wanted the war to kill more people and to create a section that eventually would create countries in the what I'm calling the Eastern European countries, which are smaller countries, have always had an issue, not always, but in the last 200-300 years, it's had an issue with the buffer between Russia and Germany, or the Austrian-Hungary Empire. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Wish you a good evening, and thank you, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.